Welcome back to SM Sports Radio. March Madness has started. I know we released a giant episode about that last week, but it's finally begun. I know we were both super excited, both staying up a little bit too late, honestly, watching those games, but we sleep in May, so who cares? But Samuel, I know at least you had a good weekend being a Clemson student, so tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I watched 56 hours of college basketball this past week, and anyone who knows me knows that is just pretty much my heaven. Had college basketball on, obviously for the first four games on Tuesday and Wednesday, and then all day Thursday and Friday, and much of Saturday and Sunday as well. So just a great week of hoops in general. But yeah, you kind of mentioned my squad, the Clemson Tigers. I really had no faith in our team. I thought we would lose in the first round to New Mexico. But boy, was I proven wrong. Brad Brownell had the guys ready, especially on the defensive end, shutting down New Mexico en route to a 20-point win. And then fast forward to Sunday, Clemson beating Baylor outright as 4.5-point dogs, held Baylor to one of its lowest shooting percentages of the season. And the Clemson Tigers are headed to the Sweet 16 off of two huge performances by Chase Hunter, something that we did not really expect at all out of the senior guard. And P.J. Hall in those two wins, just 19 minutes in each game. So moving forward, I think the Tigers have a much higher ceiling that they still haven't reached, which is crazy thinking that they are heading into the second weekend. I also,
Yeah.
I know that your team your teams actually had some issues this weekend. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
No, I don't want to talk about it, but I'm going to anyways. My Tigers, Auburn, had a bit worse of a time than yours as they lost to 14 or 13 seed Yale, 78-76. Chad Baker-Mazar ejected very early in that game for throwing an elbow. I've seen a lot of fans upset about that. I get the other guy did something first, but you threw an elbow at the end of the day and you got ejected. I don't have a problem with that call. I think it's a bit hard, but also fair. I think that was completely warranted, but I think it took the life out of Auburn a little bit, but they managed to get it back and had a chance to send it to overtime late in the game with Trey Donaldson at the free throw line, who then missed both, and Katie Johnson missed at the buzzer, and Yale won. Yale was just shooting the lights out completely. Those Ivy League kids, they were calculating the angle of the ball through the air in real time, felt like, because they did not miss at all. It was very frustrating to watch, and just for a team that had so much hype around it going into the tournament, a team that I actually picked to win because of the form they were on, picked them to win the entirety of March Madness. They will not be doing that. We're being sent home from Spokane early, and then as for the Florida Gators, this game might have been even more painful just because of the way it happened. It was a slow and painful death throughout that game as Florida refused to play defense in that one, in a game that I think we saw this happen to a lot of SEC teams this year, where SEC refs this year have been so intent on blowing a whistle for any tiny bit of contact all year in SEC play that these SEC teams are now getting to the tournament where sometimes they let them play a bit more, but in this game it felt like you're right back at home in the SEC with the whistles, and then Florida could not adjust to that whatsoever, especially with the loss of Micah Henlogton for this game. I think that the Gators didn't really know what to do on the defensive side against Colorado, and it showed as they allowed 102 points, finally losing on a almost buzzer beater from Simpson there at the end there. But going into this game, if you would have told me that Florida put up 100 and Walter Clayton had over 30, I would have said Gators by a million, but this is why you play the games, I guess, as that one was a hard one to swallow. It was very, very sad. And then that and the Yale loss happened in the span of about 5 minutes of real time. So it was not a good 5 minutes to be Mike Farmer, I tell you what.
Yeah, I was actually thinking of you while I was watching those two games. My family was sitting in a Buffalo Wild Wings in Charlotte on Friday, as it was the day that there were no games in Charlotte. And the Florida game and the Auburn game were on TVs beside each other, and I was obviously texting you during both of those games, just getting your thoughts and reactions. And I just felt so terrible. I don't think there was a worse person to be in the world at that time than Micah Farmer.
No,
And
I don't think so.
and you mentioned it, like the loss of Micah Henlogton, I feel like is what was really the huge blow to Florida in this game. Lampkin was able to go off because Henlogton wasn't inside to protect the rim. You got Alex Condon, a guy that has really improved over the season, but is just not the guy on interior defense that Hand-Lockton is. Feel terrible as well for Walter Clayton Jr., who hit that big shot just under 10 seconds left, and then the no
made
call
it a
at the
bit
end.
too early, unfortunately.
The no call at the end, I think, is another notable thing, because if you look at the replay, KJ Simpson actually pushed off with that left arm, but I get that you can't call that at that juncture of the game. I just felt really bad for you.
It's a foul. You can, especially when you've been blowing the whistle all game. Never mind.
Yeah.
We don't need to get into that. But yeah, it was just a very disappointing couple games for sure. I think Florida will be back next year for sure, especially if they can get Walter Clayton to come back. I trust Todd Golden a lot in the direction he's been taking this program, and especially Florida struggles a bit on the NIL front sometimes, even though you wouldn't necessarily think so. They struggle to get donations sometimes, so I don't know if they'll be able to lure Walter Clayton back, but if they do, I think the Gators will be right back here and further next year. So, but as far as teams that we don't have a vested interest in, it was a great weekend of basketball otherwise, and I think the one that stands out immediately was the Jack Golke legacy game versus Kentucky as the future TurboTax agent went off.
Yeah, man, oh man, Jack Golke could not miss in that game, and I actually watched a couple clips of a TikToker called Awful Coaching, and he just went in on John Calipari for about a combined 5 minutes, just breaking down play after play where Kentucky did not adjust to the screen action that Oakland was using to get Golke open. Golke even making a lot of shots in which he wasn't really open, some fadeaway sidestep threes. Man, just could not miss in that game off of the bench. I think even cooler than his performance, albeit as cool as that performance was, those 10 threes, 32 points overall, the next day all those endorsements and commercials and sponsorships he got and filmed in the hotel ballroom, that, my friends, is what NIL was intended to be. And I hope we see more of that in the future. Just a player on a Cinderella team that just goes off, and then the next day they're able to maximize their performance by using their name, image, or likeness to promote a company. And I think that's exactly what we saw with Golke, and I think that's what it needs to be in the NIL world instead of just paying players directly from a collective. But super cool story, definitely the story of the tournament. And just got to touch on Kentucky one more time, kind of put them to rest, as we've kind of been high on them in this podcast, and everyone knows the talent was there the whole time. And I think this game was the final straw and kind of was the nail in the coffin that Calipari is an amazing recruiter, but he is not a good coach at all, and that just showed over and over again in this game.
And I think especially it showed as soon as Oakland played NC State, because I was one of the people who's like, well, if he's hot, he's hot. Sometimes there's just nothing you can do about a guy. And then NC State went out and, like you said, they eliminated that screen action and really kept Golke in check. And when you see a team that does not have the talent, frankly, that Kentucky does, and NC State be able to really shut down Oakland and win that game, even though they did need overtime to do it, I think that reflects even more poorly on Calipari, saying, well, if these guys could adjust, why can't you, with how respected you are as a coach and how highly valued you are? So, like you said, I think that's the final nail in the coffin for them. And speaking of nails in coffins, we were watching the Samford-Kansas game, and that foul at the end of that game where it was a clean block. We're just going to come out and say it was a clean block. Samford was absolutely robbed versus Kansas, and I like what they've done. I don't know if you've seen the Samford merch that's come out after that with the all ball, all heart stuff that they've been releasing, but I really like that. Yeah, they were absolutely robbed, and I think Kansas immediately showed they shouldn't have moved on as they got absolutely obliterated by Gonzaga in the next game.
Yeah, I just felt so bad for Samford and A.J. Staten-McRae. He had a LeBron-esque chase down block, but the official who had a good angle on it to make the right call, in this case a no call, absolutely blew it and was a victim of the moment in which Nick Timberlake fell to the deck hard, but I think he fell to the deck hard just because he was surprised that he got blocked. And like you said, just feel terrible for those Samford players, feel terrible for Bucky McMillan. He's done a great job at that program. Recently announced that he'll be receiving a contract extension, which is notable because he was already signed through 2030. So who knows how long that contract is. They don't have to disclose the details because they are a private school. But he's really building something special there in Birmingham. Couldn't be happier for the guy who started his coaching career at the high school level in that area and now continues to shine at the highest level. And I'll tell you right now, the Samford Bulldogs will be back in this stage.
Oh, for sure. I think as long as he stays there, Samford, it's going to be between them and I think Richie over there at Furman is another good coach in the SoCon. So it's going to be between those two. I think a lot of the time for your first SoCon bids every year. Then another team I know you were very high on going into this tournament that's pretty much looked the part so far is the Marquette Golden Eagles, as they had a little bit of a scare early versus Western Kentucky, but then pulled away at the end, and then were able to knock off Colorado as well to send themselves to the Sweet 16. So, are you still high on Marquette right now, or have you seen anything that concerns you with this team?
Yeah, I'm super high on Marquette. Tyler Kolek was reinserted into the lineup after missing a lot of time with a groin injury, and he looks like he just has not missed a beat. He played all 40 minutes in the second round win over Colorado and scored 21 points, including a lot of timely buckets and drives to the basket in the last few minutes that really pushed them over the top against Colorado. I don't really know how to analyze this team other than to just tell you this is a team full of dogs. They're hungry. They have a great coach in Shaka Smart, and I am very high on this team. I still see them getting to the Final Four. I like their path. Got to shout out KJ Simpson in that second round game. He played all 40 minutes as well, got a lot of good buckets. He scored 20 points. But man, this Marquette team has me fired up when I watch them. They play good team defense, and they know how to score the basketball. They've got a big three of Tyler Kolek, Cam Jones, and Oso Ighodaro, and they are putting on for the Big East, who is disrespected, as was the ACC, coming into this tournament.
Yes, I think that's shown immediately as we've gotten into this tournament that both the Big East and the ACC, I think the Big East even more notably with teams like St. John's, Seton Hall, that in my opinion should have been in the tournament and then were left out. Are you telling me that a St. John's or a Seton Hall wouldn't have done better than a Colorado State in this tournament? I refuse to believe that, as you look at these Mountain West teams getting just obliterated over and over. Utah State winning their first round matchup versus TCU and then losing by 40 in the second round to Purdue. So I think there were a lot more deserving teams than these 6 Mountain West teams that got in, but I think that's another point for later. But speaking of Purdue, they've looked absolutely dominant so far. I know we are giving them a bit of a hard time for the death taxes Matt Painter thing, but this Purdue team looks very, very good in the tournament for once this year, as they have been just mowing down teams so far.
Yeah, especially watching that game on Sunday, I almost wanted to prepare an apology statement to Matt Painter because he had that Purdue team ready to go, and while it was a boring product to watch just as a basketball game, that just speaks to how prepared Purdue was. They knew their plan. They knew that Zach Edey was going to be unstoppable inside, both on the glass and scoring the basketball, and boy was he unstoppable. He had 21 points and 11 rebounds at the half, and then finished with 23 and 14 because he didn't have to play the entire second half as it was a blowout, as you said. And this team just looks different than they have in the past. We saw them repeatedly over the past few years just lose to much lesser teams in the first few rounds, but now they're advancing to the second weekend, and this looks like a team motivated. This looks like a team that is just focused on strictly business. Zach Edey hasn't cracked a smile in any post-game press conferences. This team is hungry to get back to the Final Four, and I think they just might do it. I wasn't too high on them heading into the tournament, but they've really opened my eyes and turned a lot of heads nationally in their first 2 games in their performances.
Yeah, I think all the 1 seeds this year so far have looked very strong. UConn just been obliterating teams as they usually do. North Carolina looking very strong, although the 1 seed that did have a scare was the Houston Cougars versus Texas A&M, as Ryan Elvin at the end of that game hitting the clutch free throw to ice that game at the end to let Houston survive, but A&M with the buzzer beater at the end of regulation to send it to overtime in a game that A&M, towards the end of that one, I was starting to think, oh, they're destined to win this game with some of the shots that were falling for the Aggies, but Houston survives and advances, although I don't know versus a Duke team that hasn't really had any competition so far. Do you think that's going to benefit Duke versus Houston, or do you think that Houston's already battle-tested, and so they'll be able to go into that Duke game feeling better about themselves if it does end up being a close game?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like there's advantages for both teams. Houston, obviously, more battle tested over the long stretch of the season as well as in this tournament with this barn burner with A&M. But to be honest with you, Duke is playing its best basketball right now. And before the tournament in our last episode, I talked about how Jared McCain was the X factor for this team.
Oh,
And
he's been on fire.
He's played incredibly well. He's shot the ball insanely well from the outside, making 6 threes, I think, in the first half in this second round game. And they just dominated JMU, a popular upset pick in that second round game who had upset Wisconsin in the first round. But Duke just made them look like a JV high school team and just dominated that game wire to wire. Jared McCain's playing his best basketball. Tyrese Proctor looks the part as well. Filipowski and Mitchell have been dominant inside. I think this Houston-Duke game is going to be pretty competitive, and Houston probably is not particularly looking forward to play this Duke Blue Devils team in its current state.
No, they're going to wear each other out, and then Marquette's going to beat the winner. That's what's being set up to happen right now. Yes. But on the other side, or actually on the bottom side of that part of the bracket, Tennessee and Creighton, two teams that I think have just been kind of quietly going about business, although Creighton had a big scare with Oregon in their second round game, as that game went to double overtime, as Cousinard did his best to send Oregon to the Sweet 16, but it just wasn't quite enough.
Yeah, Cousinard was the best player in this tournament through 2 rounds. 40 points in the first round win over the University of South Carolina, and then 32 in the 86-73 2-overtime loss to Creighton. He and N'Faly Dante, fun fact, scored every single point for Oregon in the second half to push that game to overtime. Just absolutely carried the team on their backs. But yeah, this Creighton team, as we know, can really light it up from the outside. They struggled in the first half, but in the second half, they were able to retake the lead and then hold on to send it to overtime. And then in double overtime in particular, they really were able to pull away. Here's a fun fact for you that I just have to throw in as a jab to the Mountain West. Creighton scored 15 points in double overtime, a 5-minute period. And in the round of 64, Colorado State scored 11 points in the first half, which is 20 minutes of basketball. So the Creighton Blue Jays, as we know, have a really potent offense. I think they're going to continue that this weekend against Tennessee, a Tennessee team that I just don't think has looked its normal self ever since the end of the regular season. We saw them lose pretty badly in the first round in the SEC tournament, and although they handled a 15 seed in St. Peter's, they nearly allowed a Texas team that is quite frankly not very good to come back and win that one. They were able to rely on their defense and hold it off, but Creighton, Tennessee is a game that I'm really looking forward to this weekend because I think Creighton has the opportunity to pull off the upset.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I like this Creighton team a lot, but is there anything else you want to discuss from this past weekend, or you want to go ahead and preview the Sweet 16 we have coming up?
I think we can go ahead and keep it rolling.
All right, so we'll start off with Clemson and Arizona in a game that intrigues me a lot coming in because I think before the tournament, if you told me these two teams match up, I would take Arizona pretty easily. But the form that Clemson's on right now, especially if you get this same Chase Hunter, and I don't know, Arizona, I think if you can slow down Caleb Love, Clemson has a chance.
Yeah, you kind of mentioned it. Caleb Love is playing probably the most egregious basketball of the season for him right now. Arizona's kind of gotten... They've kind of been fortunate that other players around him have played their best. We saw that, especially in the second round game against Dayton. Arizona was able to jump out to a big lead, but then Caleb Love just started chucking from 3, and that really allowed Dayton to get back in it before they made their final push at Arizona to stretch that lead back out and win that game quite comfortably. But you mentioned it, Chase Hunter, if he continues to play this well, Chase Hunter has scored 21 and 20 points in the first 2 rounds. And I'm just telling you right now, if Chase Hunter scores 21 points, there is absolutely zero chance that Clemson loses this game. Chase Hunter, we've seen throughout this season, be a little bit inconsistent, but when he scores 15 points or more, Clemson wins 91% of the time. And even more so than Chase Hunter, we haven't even seen Joe Girard or PJ Hall's best in this tournament, with Hall playing less than half the game in both the first and the second round. Has been dominant inside in the times that he has played, but just can't stay out of foul trouble. A lot of that has to do with just his over-aggressiveness on defense, and a little bit of it has to do with the refs being quick to blow their whistle. And then Joe Girard just has not gotten going yet in this tournament. Hasn't made more than 2 threes in a game in either game. We've seen him make as many as 6 3-pointers in a game in the regular season. So I think if you get a good Chase Hunter and combine that with about 30 minutes of PJ Hall and 3 made 3-pointers or more from Joe Girard, then Arizona is quite frankly on upset alert. If you don't get all 3 of those things, I lean Arizona in this one. I don't know why I almost said Kentucky. But Caleb Love is just going to need to be efficient and timely for this Arizona team. If he is, and if 2 of those 3 things don't happen for Clemson, I'm going to take Arizona here. And I don't think all 3 of those things are going to happen for Clemson because that would just be a little bit too perfect, but I sure hope it does.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. Then we also have a national championship rematch from last year in this round as UConn takes on San Diego State, and I think UConn wins this game, although they're going to have to slow down Jaden DeLee, who is San Diego State's best player right now, averaging 28 points per game in the tournament, but I think UConn's going to be up to the task there, and I think even if Ledee does score 28 again, I think UConn just can outscore San Diego State anyway, so I think UConn gets this done.
Yeah, you can't beat a team like UConn with just one player, and Ledee's usage rate for San Diego State is well over 52%, and that's just not going to work against a team with as much offensive and defensive prowess as UConn. We're going to need to see Lamont Butler really step up in this game. Going to need 15 or more points from him, and you're going to need to see San Diego State play some of its best defense of the season. I don't see either of those things happening. Give me UConn in a blowout here.
Yeah, I completely agree with that too. Then we have Alabama and North Carolina. This is going to be a great game for guard play as Mark Sears and RJ Davis go at it. I'm super excited for this game. Should be decently high scoring. I think, though, it's going to be decided down low, even though the guard play is very good here. I think Armando Bacot is frankly going to abuse Grant Nelson in this one down low, and because of that, I think I think UNC gets this done.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I think Bacot's going to dominate the glass in particular and going to get a lot of offensive rebounds that are going to steal possessions for UNC, give them extra opportunities to score. And when you talk about Mark Sears and RJ Davis, both are great players. But I just trust R.J. Davis a little bit more in this one. I think when you couple he and Armando Bacot with Harrison Ingram, and if you get production from Cormac Ryan, who's been a little bit streaky this season, or even some scoring from Elliot Cadeau, I just don't see Alabama being able to keep up defensively with this squad. I've seen UNC play a couple times in person now, and when they turn it on defense, it's pretty much impossible to score on them, especially in the painted area with Bacot over there around the rim and Harrison Ingram playing some good perimeter defense. So, yeah, give me UNC in this one. Alabama, if they get it into a track meet, has a chance, but any low-scoring game favors UNC, and so I'm going to take the Tar Heels here.
Yeah, I could definitely see that happening. The UNC defense, I think, if they buckle down, it's going to be really hard for Alabama to win this game as a result. Then Illinois and Iowa State, a very, very fun matchup between the red-hot offense of Illinois and the lockdown defense of Iowa State here. So which one of those do you think comes out on top?
Yeah, I actually lean Illinois here. Terrence Shannon Jr. is averaging 28 points a game in this tournament. Although Iowa State has played some incredible defense, they've played Morehead State and they've played that was Illinois, excuse me. They've played South Dakota State and they've played Washington State. 2 teams with offenses that are quite frankly not great. Illinois is going to be the best offense they've faced in months, I think, and I just think Illinois' red-hot offense is going to be too much. I think Iowa State is going to have a few scoring droughts that are just going to knock them out of this game. I think Illinois is going to pull ahead early. Iowa State is going to bring it back a little bit closer just because of their defensive prowess. And if Iowa State's going to win, they're going to need Momcilovic to make some 3-pointers, probably 3 or 4 of them actually. And so for those reasons, I'm going to take Illinois here.
Yeah, this is a game that at the start of the tournament I would have taken Iowa State in, but the more I've watched Illinois, I love the ability of these scorers, especially Terrence Shannon Jr., who is just a pleasure to watch, honestly, score the basketball. So I like Illinois now in this one as well. Then on Friday, we have NC State taking on Marquette in the only double-digit seed to make the Sweet 16 this year, and NC State. But I think this is where their run comes to an end. I think the magic runs out here, and I think Marquette is just frankly too good, too many good players compared to NC State.
Yeah, I think you're right. DJ Burns and DJ Horn are obviously going to look to keep this Cinderella run alive, but I think Marquette, when you reinsert Kolek into that lineup, they're just going to be too much for the NC State defense to handle, and then I think Osa Ighodaro is going to be able to maybe not shut down, but limit DJ Burns on the inside, who's just been incredibly dominant in scoring down there in the post. I think Marquette is going to have one of those 15-2, 15-4 type runs in the second half at some point, and I think they are going to get it done here.
Yeah, I like that pick a lot. I think NC State, it's been a great run for them, honestly, but I just don't think, I think the talent gap is too big there. Then a game that really intrigues me here is Gonzaga and Purdue. This is a game that before the tournament I'm taking Gonzaga all day, every day, but I think Purdue is starting to prove that they've actually shown up this year for March. So I think that Edey is going to continue to dominate down low. I think boring Purdue basketball is going to continue, but it's effective boring basketball. I think Purdue gets it done.
Yeah, it's super boring basketball, but it is effective, like you said. Purdue's guards have really come to play in this tournament. The problem with Purdue guards of the past is that they have not been able to make defenses pay for sagging off of the three and try to double or triple Edey, but this season that's just not the case. Purdue has capable shooters outside this season. Gonzaga, though, playing its best basketball this season, they just look like they're in a crazy rhythm. They have had a relatively easy path to get to this point, playing McNeese State and injury-riddled Kansas team, so not too sure how valid that offensive explosion is for Gonzaga. I think this is going to be a really, really close game, and I've flip-flopped a few different ways in previewing this game, but I'm just going to lean on the best player in the country in Zach Edey. I think he's going to be too much inside. No one, not even Graham Ike, is going to be able to stop Edey inside. I think Purdue is going to make timely shots. I think Matt Painter is going to create opportunities for his guys to score the basketball when Edey is taken away at times, and so I'm going to take Purdue here.
Yeah, will this be the year that Purdue finally makes it back to the Final Four? I don't know, but I definitely think they get at least this game done to move to the Elite Eight. Then a game we've already touched on a little bit, Duke versus Houston. This is, I think, going to be one of the better games of this Sweet 16, which I know that people always talk about, oh, we need more upsets in the first round, but I think the lack of upsets and teams making Cinderella runs this year has really benefited us at this point in the tournament, because you just look down this list and all these matchups are incredible this year in this Sweet 16. So this one I think is no different, but I do think Houston gets this done. I think Houston has too much defense for Duke. I think they're going to be able to lock down the Duke guards. Jared McCain, I don't think is going to have the same success shooting the three in this game, and I think Houston is going to be able to score along with locking down Duke's shooters. So I think the Cougars move on to the Elite Eight.
Yeah, I agree with you there, especially on the point about Cinderellas. The lack of Cinderellas this season making for better basketball here in the Sweet 16. Cinderellas are fun in the moment. Jack Golke was a great story. Quite frankly, I'm very glad that Oakland is not in the Sweet 16, so we get much better basketball. But yeah, this Duke-Houston game, I think that Kelvin Sampson is going to have these Houston guys prepared. They're going to have a great defensive game plan to take away Jared McCain from the outside especially. And I think their guys inside and Jawan Roberts and other guys. Obviously, you have Shed and Cryer to shut down the guards, but I think their defensive performance is what's going to win them this basketball game, and so I'm going to take Houston here.
Then the last game we have here is Creighton versus Tennessee. I think everyone knows where we're both going with this, and it is the Blue Jays to the Elite Eight. Creighton all the way until they run into someone else in the national title game, at least for me. But I think Tennessee isn't built to beat this Creighton team at all. I think Dalton Knecht's going to need to drop 45 for Tennessee to win this game. Just Creighton has too much scoring, frankly. Even though the Tennessee defense is good, I don't think they'll be able to slow down everyone by any means.
Yeah, I saw this Tennessee team in person in Charlotte last weekend, and I'm just not too high on them even still, just because their offense, while their defense is incredible, their offense I just don't think is potent enough to keep up with this Creighton squad. Creighton is going to be able to take advantage of this Tennessee defense with their incredible ball movement, their chemistry, and their head coach in Greg McDermott, who just excels in getting his guys open looks. I think Trey Alexander is going to have a big game. Steven Ashworth is going to knock down a couple big shots. I think Kalkbrenner is going to protect the rim and dominate inside and on the glass. And I also think that Baylor Shireman is going to knock down a few triples after he struggled in the Oregon game. And like you said, Connect still a sleeping giant. We haven't really seen him go off yet in this tournament. I think he could go off, quite frankly, and Creighton still win this game just because of the lack of offense around Connect this season. So, yeah, I'm going to take Creighton here. I continue to be really confident in this Creighton squad, and I think they have a chance to go all the way.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. This should be a really entertaining Sweet 16, and then obviously the Elite 8 later this weekend. And by the end of the weekend, we'll know who's our Final Four for this season, which I'm super excited for. But that is it for basketball. Moving over to baseball, huge news recently with Shohei Ohtani and his translator Ipe and all that gambling stuff coming out. $4.5 million in gambling debt, and I don't know about you, but this whole thing seems fishy to me because the story has changed about 3 different times, whether Ipe stole the money or whether Ohtani was helping him cover his debts or whether it's just Ipe betting by proxy for Ohtani. So Ohtani did a press conference yesterday, released his own statement about what happened, saying that Ipe stole the money, and that's Ohtani's word for it. So I think innocent until proven guilty for Ohtani, but it does not look great right now.
Yeah, and it's no surprise that he would come out with a statement declaring his innocence. He's not going to come out and just admit that he was the one placing the bets or
imagine he did that. It was like a DraftKings sponsorship.
enabling Ipe to place the bets, because then that would really put Rob Manfred in a pretty impossible situation. He would pretty much have to either reinstate Pete Rose or ban Ohtani for life from baseball just due to the integrity issues there. But like you said, this whole situation seems really fishy to me. I just can't picture a world or a scenario where a translator would have direct access to banking and wire info and just extremely personal info of Ohtani's. I think one of two things happened. I think either Ohtani was the one placing these bets or having the bets be placed for him under Ipe's name. That's scenario one. Or I think that he was looking to be generous and cover for a friend who he knew had a gambling problem in his translator Ipe. I think either he was the one placing the bets or he was willing to pay off the gambling debt. And the story is just not adding up for me, like you said.
Yeah, well, we'll have to see what happens with that. Obviously, it's still in progress right now, but another thing happening this week, we have opening day finally this Thursday, so I know we're both super excited for baseball to finally be actually back. I know we had the Soul series there for a couple days, but that was, by the way, MLB, that was weird. Do that like on a weekend or something.
Yeah, at 6 a.m. I did get up for it. I got up for it, but it was hard.
Think of being a fan of the Dodgers or Padres who actually lives in California. You're getting up at like 3 a.m. to watch that. That whole thing was so weird, logistics-wise. But anyway, let's start with our division picks for the season, starting like we did last week out in the West. So with the NL West, who do you have coming in last, and why is it the Rockies?
Yeah, it's definitely the Rockies. They were a bottom 5 offense in 2023, and if you just look at their roster, most of that same exact lineup returns. They re-signed Charlie Blackmon to a 1-year, $13 million deal. You'd love to see him stay in Denver. But you have a depressing rotation full of veterans in Kyle Freeland, Cal Quantrill, Dakota Hudson, and Austin Gomber. I just don't think this Rockies team is going to do anything, especially in a division like the NL West. And I think they're the clear number 5. You could make an argument for any of the other top 4 being shuffled around, and I think we're going to get into some of that discourse here shortly, but the Rockies are a clear number 5 for me in this NL West division.
Yeah, Rockies are 5 for me. I don't think too much more needs to be added on top of that. They're bad. Then in 4th place for me, I have the San Diego Padres. I like the acquisition of Dylan Cease. I don't know how much you really have as far as depth, both in the rotation and the bullpen. I think past your stars there, you start to struggle a lot. And then the hitting is going to be good. All the 13 players they have that used to play shortstop all around the field, I think there's upside there, but this is a team that last year really struggled in close games and extra innings, and I think that that's something that is kind of in the DNA of a team and a group of players. So I don't know that that's something you can fix that easily. And then in a division as competitive as this, I just don't think the Padres can afford to mess around like they usually end up doing. So I think they end up fourth.
Yeah, I have the San Francisco Giants coming in fourth in this division. I just don't have any faith in this lineup at all. I think the offense has a lot of holes. Jorge Soler and Matt Chapman are good, not great additions for me in free agency for this lineup. I do like a lot their signing of Blake Snell. He didn't get quite the contract that he wanted, but he does land a good fit in the San Francisco Giants. I think that pair with Logan Webb is one of the best 1-2 punches in baseball. I don't think it quite competes with Spencer Strider and Max Fried over with my Braves, but I think that's a really solid 1-2. I just don't think they're going to keep up with the likes of the Padres, the Diamondbacks, and the Dodgers. I think Micah's going to get into a little bit why he's high on the Giants, but for me, I'm not seeing it just quite yet. And then in third place for me is the Padres. Obviously, you hate to see guys like Juan Soto, Blake Snell, Josh Hader all leave town. But I still think there's a lot of great talent in this lineup, especially in Tatis, Manny Machado, Xander Bogaerts, Ha-Seong Kim, etc., etc. I think the trade for Dylan Cease really helps this rotation a lot. I like the top three in this rotation in Darvish, Cease, and Musgrove. I think the depth of this rotation is a little better than the Giants, at least for right now for me, unless I see otherwise. So give me the Padres third and the Giants fourth in the NL West.
Yeah, I have the Diamondbacks up in third. I think that there's going to be a little bit of a, even though they didn't win the World Series, making the World Series hangover here. I think there's still talent on this team for sure. Zach Gallen is your obvious ace here on this pitching staff, and then this hitting core is still really good, really young. Gabriel Moreno has really started to break out for them behind the plate and in the batter's box. You have Corbin Carroll still. You know what you're getting from Ketel Marte, but I just don't think they're quite as good as the Dodgers or the Giants, so I have them finishing in third. Then in second, I actually have the Los Angeles Dodgers, which if you're good at process by elimination, you know who that means I have in first. But I think that the Shohei Ohtani stuff is a problem. Yoshinobu Yamamoto's fastball is getting absolutely nuked right now. I think if for the 4 starts Tyler Glasnow is healthy, he's going to be great, but injury-prone players usually don't become less injury-prone is my thing with him. And then this lineup is amazing. I can't knock this lineup at all. It's a great lineup, but how far can that go when your pitching starts to fall off a cliff? And we saw that last year with the Dodgers, the pitching struggles that they had, and how that really knocked them in the postseason. And I think that with Ohtani not pitching this year, then who knows how much he's even going to be on the field with what happens with this off-field stuff. If Yamamoto's fastball keeps getting hammered, if Glasnow gets injured, I think things start to look pretty bad on the pitching side for the Dodgers really quickly. And then this is a bullpen that has struggled the last couple of years. So I still think the lineup is going to be enough to bail them out of the bottom part of this division, but I think they don't win it this year. I think they stay in second.
Yeah, in second place for me, I've actually got the Arizona Diamondbacks, a team that didn't have great regular season success last year, but in the postseason were able to string some wins and some series wins together all the way to the World Series. I think that taste of success is going to really carry over into this season. I don't really think a hangover effect is due as much for the Diamondbacks. I'm really high on Corbin Carroll. I think he is a potential MVP candidate. Obviously, Ketel Marte up there in the lineup, and Gabriel Moreno, as Micah referenced. Zach Gallen, as he mentioned as well, is their clear ace. But other guys like Merrill Kelly and Eduardo Rodriguez, who are also in that rotation, I think are going to be enough to get the Diamondbacks to second here. And then for me, number one, I've got the Dodgers in the NL West. I think the trio at the top of the lineup is just going to be too much. It's going to be a nightmare for starting pitching day in and day out. Kind of fitting that two of the top 3 guys are Ohtani and Betts, as Ohtani Betts has been something that has been revealed in the past few days. Ohtani Betts, and he's still a free man as we see the situation right now. We'll see if he's not a free man in the coming days as this investigation continues. But I'm not going to necessarily look at this team as what could happen in terms of injuries or scandals. I'm just going to evaluate the talent as it is right now, and if everyone stays healthy, if everyone in the lineup stays in the lineup, this is undoubtedly the best team in the division, one of the best teams in baseball. And I think when you combine the lineup with a guy like Tyler Glasnow and Clayton Kershaw in the rotation once Kershaw's back, and then Yamamoto, I think he's going to figure it out. That fastball obviously getting raked right now. But I think the Dodgers are a comfortable number one for me here in this division.
Well, my number one is going to be the San Francisco Giants, which might seem a little bit crazy, but hear me out. This is an organization that has a history of just bringing random good teams out of absolutely nowhere. And I think these under-the-radar moves that... I like these moves a lot. Jorge Soler adds a ton of power. Matt Chapman adds a ton of power and great defense as well. Then it's not all power, though. You have Young-Ho Lee, your new outfield addition, who's really going to be your get-on-base guy in front of Soler, in front of Chapman. I like the upside of Blake Sable behind the plate. J.D. Davis, I think, is a decent role player for this team. And then you move to the rotation. They have the top two guys from the Cy Young voting last year, and Blake Snell and Logan Webb on the bump, and then Anthony DeSclafani is still a pretty good starting pitcher. Then you move to the bullpen. There's a guy in there named Camilo Doval who is absolutely lights out consistently at the top of the MLB in saves. So I really like the upside of this Giants team. I think they can be a sneaky division winner this season, like we saw from them in 2021, where they just won 115 games out of nowhere. So I think you could see that same sort of thing with this Giants team this year, and I'm really high on them. So I think they win the NL West. Then over to the NL Central. In fifth place, I have the Pittsburgh Pirates. If they had starting pitching, I would move them up, but they don't outside of Mitch Keller, so they're going to stay in the 5 slot. But I like the upside of this lineup, a lot of young guys moving up, and then obviously, having David Bednar out of the pen, but just not enough starting pitching for the Pirates.
Yeah, kind of like we alluded to with the Rockies, this team is not good. It's a comfortable fifth in the division for me as well. Brian Reynolds and O'Neal Cruz are a fun duo, but I don't think Cruz can really stay healthy over a full 162. He played only 96 games last season. Just a fun storyline that might be fun to follow is whether or not number one prospect Paul Skeens gets called up to pitch in a rotation that just, quite frankly, has nobody right now. I think that's going to be the main storyline for Pittsburgh. I don't think winning is going to be in the picture here. And then number 4 for me, I've got the Brewers. I think the core of William Contreras, Christian Yelich, Willy Adames, and then you add guys like Gary Sanchez and Rhys Hoskins. I think those are going to be exciting things in the lineup. But I think the loss of Corbin Burns via the trade and Brandon Woodruff to injury, they'll start the season without Devin Williams, and they lose their manager in Craig Counsell. I think that's going to cause the Milwaukee Brewers to slide down the standings a little bit for me, so I have them in 4th place.
Yeah, in 4th for me, it's going to be the St. Louis Cardinals. This rotation, I like the Sonny Gray signing, but I think the rest of these guys might get lit up. Miles Michaelis, Lance Lynn, Steven Matz, Kyle Gibson. Like 5 years ago, that's a pretty good rotation, but in the year 2024, I think it's very possible those dudes get absolutely lit up. And then this lineup, Paul Goldschmidt, Nolan Arenado, I think are both regressing. That's pretty obvious to see. You lost Tyler O'Neill, and I just... This team feels like they're stuck in the past right now still, despite Yadi and Waino retiring. It still feels like they're stuck in 2016, and I just don't think this team has a lot of upside. Obviously, you have young players like Jordan Walker and Nolan Gorman, who could both be pretty exciting if they get hot, but I just don't think this team has enough talent to finish any higher than 4th. Then in 3rd for me, it's going to be the Milwaukee Brewers. Like you said, the loss of Brandon Woodruff for the season due to injury, and then Corbin Burns to the Orioles are huge losses. Starting the season without Devin Williams is big, but I like this hitting core, honestly. It feels like the Brewers have almost reversed, where the upside is now in the lineup, and the pitching might be a bit suspect outside of the bullpen, but the Rhys Hoskins signing, that's going to add good power, something this Brewers team consistently lacks. Then I like the Gary Sanchez signing as well. If he does what he did for San Diego, that's great for the Brewers. Then obviously you have your Yelich as well, Adames, Contreras, and then Jackson Churio being called up to the opening day roster. I don't know that he's an amazing player right away. Everyone's going to need some time to adjust to big league pitching, but unless your name's Wyatt Langford, but I think Jackson Churio is definitely going to be a bright spot for the Brewers this year, but I just don't think they're better than the Cubs or the Reds.
In 3rd place for me is the St. Louis Cardinals. like Micah kind of alluded to. Goldschmidt's no longer his MVP self. Nolan Arenado had his worst offensive numbers of his career last season in 2023. I like their rotation in Gray, Gibson, Lynn, Michaelis, and Matz. I think it's good, not great. I think this rotation alone puts them ahead of Milwaukee for me. Just don't have much faith in the guys that the Brewers are going to be sending out there every fifth day. And then in second place for me is the Cincinnati Reds. I really wanted to pick them to win the division, but I just couldn't quite do it. Regardless, this is a really fun team that's really young. You have guys like Ellie De La Cruz, Spencer Steer, you have Christian Encarnacion Strand, and then you have a guy in Will Benson who has shown flashes as well. These are all breakout players that need more reps. I'm just not quite ready to pick them to be number one in this NL Central division, but I do hope that Hunter Green can lead this staff. I hope he can stay healthy, get that ERA down a little bit, and I really like this Reds team a lot.
Yeah, my second place team is going to be the Chicago Cubs. The re-signing of Cody Bellinger is massive for them. That was something that I did not expect them to be able to do coming into the offseason. Then the addition of Shoto Imanaga to add to Justin Steele. Those are two great lefties to have at the front end of your rotation. And then this lineup, too, with Nico Horner and Dansby Swanson, I think still has upside. Ian Happ, that he's going to provide solid stuff for you in the lineup. But I like the upside of a certain other team in Cincinnati a bit more. I think the Cubs will be a really, really solid team. I just don't think they necessarily have the breakout stars over the top to push them forward here. Although I do think that this is going to be a very, very, very tight division race.
Yeah, so I've got the Cubs coming in at number one in this Central Division. Like I said, really wanted to pick the Reds. I love the Reds. They're the most fun team in baseball. I don't think that's really up for much debate. The Cubs did, as Micah mentioned, re-sign Bellinger, which is huge for them, added the Japanese import in Shota Imanaga. I think Nico Horner and Dansby Swanson are going to have big bounce-back seasons. We've seen what Swanson can do in his time with Atlanta, especially at the plate. Last season, he struggled a little bit. I think the starting rotation is really solid with Justin Steele and Kyle Hendricks to go along with Shota Imanaga. And I think the biggest move for the Cubs is bringing in Craig Counsell. I think he's the best manager in this division. I don't think it's particularly close, and so I've got the Cubs winning the Central.
Yeah, I have the Reds winning the Central. I am a Reds fan, so I will admit there is a little bit of bias here, but I think this team is just primed for big things right now. If the entire team would quit getting injured, by the way, everyone is hurt. It's really upsetting. I think we're going to be good once we get out of April, but goodness, right now it's a bit depressing. Nick Lodolo on the IL, Matt McClain hurt, TJ Friedel with a broken wrist. I think we Joey Votto cursed ourselves, to be honest, letting him go. But I definitely think this team has upside. Hunter Green is a flame-throwing pitcher. When he gets hit hard. So we'll have to see if he can work that out. Try to induce a bit more weak contact when he does get hit. Then the other pitchers on the staff, Andrew Abbott enjoyed a great breakout last season as a rookie. Then bring in Frankie Montas. I'm not sure about that move, honestly. It was pretty bad in New York, but if you get Oakland Frankie Montas, I think you end up really happy with that. Brandon Williamson has upside. Nick Martinez was brought in to be a good fifth starter. Then I think behind the plate is something that's going to be really interesting for the Reds this year because Tyler Stevenson, who was really starting to build up as a young player, was bad last year, but through spring training this season really started pulling the ball in the air a bit more, something that is really important for a hitter. If you can pull the ball in the air, you're going to be a much better major league hitter than if you can't. Then obviously the core of the young guys, you have Ellie, you have Matt McClain, Spencer Steer, great utility player, can play basically wherever you want him to. I think Christian Encarnacion Strand is going to have a 30 home run season this year. He has that kind of power even if he's not a big average guy. And then once you get TJ Friedel back patrolling center field, this outfield defense suddenly becomes pretty good. So I think this is a pretty well-rounded Reds team, not even to mention the bullpen talent with Alexis Diaz, who was one of the league's best closers last year, and then setup man Lucas Sims, who is also quite good. So I think the Reds just have the talent across the board to get this done, and I am super excited for this season. Then moving down, lastly, to the NL East, it's the Nationals in last place. There is upside here. There's good young players like C.J. Abrams, but you got to get out of the Patrick Corbin and Steven Strasburg contracts, I think, before this team can really start to move forward. So for right now, I still have them mired in last.
Yeah, the Nationals are quite frankly bad, and they're in a division where being bad equates to a lot of losses when you have to play teams over and over again, like the Braves and the Philadelphia Phillies. This Nationals team has a few young players in C.J. Abrams, Joey Meneses, and Keibert Ruiz, who
Joey
might
Meneses is 29, by the way.
True.
It's
They
Brent,
might-
it's NL Brent Rooker.
Yeah, they might provide a little bit of excitement, but you add Joey Gallo, you add Eddie Rosario, those just are not needle movers for me at all. So they're a comfortable fifth place for me. In fourth place, I have the Miami Marlins. I think the addition of Tim Anderson is one of the under the radar transactions of the offseason. You're going to have Christian Bethancourt behind the plate at times. You lose guys like Soler, Yuli Gurriel, Joey Wendell, your utility man on the infield. But then even more so, losing Sandy Alcantara to Tommy John surgery and going to have to fill the void left by Soler leaving in the offseason. I do like Yuri Perez a lot. I like Jesus Luzardo a lot. But this division is really good, and the Marlins are going to come in fourth.
Yeah, the Marlins just don't have enough power, honestly, in this lineup. There's almost no power to be seen at all across the board here, which is a huge problem. Then, as you say, Sandy Alcantara going out for the season with Tommy John is huge. They do have young guys, though. Yuri Perez, Edward Cabrera. Sixto Sanchez made the team once again this year, so we'll see if he can actually develop this time, but just not enough hitting for the Marlins, so I have them in fourth as well. And then in third, it is the New York Mets, mediocrity personified, as they have signed J.D. Martinez as well for this team in an effort to move from 77 to 83 wins. I think the Mets are going to be a good team. It's just they're in a division with the Braves and the Phillies. They have Edwin Diaz back this year, which I think is going to be huge for them. Then the Pete Alonso contract situation is weird right now. Are they going to trade him? Or are they not going to trade him? I don't know. But I just don't think there's enough, not talent. The Mets team is talented, but they get in their own way. The Mets have a tendency to get in their own way big time, and that's something that the Braves and Phillies just don't do. So I think for that reason, the Mets are going to be in third.
Yeah, the Mets are the proof in the pudding that just throwing money at guys is not going to equate to wins. They're dealt a pretty excruciating blow in learning that Kodai Senga would begin the season on the injured list with a shoulder injury. So you're going to have to rely on guys like Jose Quintana, Luis Severino, Sean Manaea, and Adrian Hauser to try to get you wins in a really good division. You lose power bat in Daniel Vogelbach, who was just a super fun guy for the Mets. Not an amazing player by any stretch, but the one likable player on the Mets for me as a Braves fan. You add Harrison Bader in the outfield, you add a couple bullpen pieces, but it's just not going to be enough to overcome the Phillies or the Braves in this division. So I've got the Mets finishing in third and insert Narcos at this point. Play the trumpets.
Yes.
In second place for me, I've got the Phillies, a team that honestly I've lost a lot of sleep over thinking about after they've eliminated my Atlanta Braves in the past two postseasons. They do lose Craig Kimbrell, who was their closer last season, but honestly he's over the hill anyway. You add
Jose Alvarado is just as good, if not better.
Oh, he's definitely better. You add Whit Merrifield to a lineup that already has guys like Harper and Bohm and a lot of other guys that are just incredible. The front end of that rotation is incredible in Nola and Wheeler. The only other 1-2 punch that I think holds a candle to them in baseball, other than I guess the Giants now, who just added Snell, are the Braves with Strider and Fried. But this team, this rotation gives me nightmares as a Braves fan. I trust the Braves, as we'll get to in a second, to win their sixth consecutive NL East division title. Maybe it's 7 if they win it this season. I'll check on that. But the Phillies are an incredible team. I think they're going to have the second most wins in the National League behind the Braves. I am that high on this team, and I just hope that they are cold in the first couple weeks of October for my sanity's sake.
Yeah, I also have the Phillies in second. I'm a bit disappointed you said they were going to have the second most wins in the National League, because that was going to be my Phillies hot take, that they were going to be the second best team in the National League behind the Braves. But like you said, this is an extremely talented team. I think if they were in any other division in baseball other than the AL East or the NL East, they would win the division pretty comfortably. It's just they're in a division with the Braves, which I think are the best team in baseball, at least as far as the regular season is concerned. But the Phillies are super talented. You know what you're going to get from Harper, Real Muto, all those bats. And then, like you said, the 1-2 punch of Aaron Nola, Zach Wheeler is amazing. But it is going to be the Braves for me again, winning this division for the 6th year in a row. Just so much talent on this team. The Chris Sale, Max Fried, and Spencer Strider trio, I think, is going to be great. Chris Sale's looked great this spring, so if he can stay healthy, this Braves rotation is going to be even scarier than it was beforehand. Then you know what this lineup is. We talked about the Yankees murderers row a couple years ago. This Braves 1 through 9 is a full 1 through 9 murderers row. And then they brought back Adam Duvall for his 3rd tour of duty in Atlanta, who's going to be platooning with Jared Kelenic, which I think is going to be a very fun platoon duo, honestly. We'll see if Kelenic can finally learn how to hit, but it's the Braves again at the top of the NL East for me.
Yeah, and obviously I'm a Braves fan, and Braves fandom aside, this is the best team in baseball. I don't think it's particularly close. You've got the best lineup 1 through 9 in baseball, which is just evidenced by the fact that you have a guy like Michael Harris in the 9-hole consistently, which is just baffling to think about with as good as he's been in his young career. Going along with the best lineup, you have the best rotation in baseball in guys like Spencer Strider, who, by the way, just added a nasty curveball.
Ridiculous. It is.
Have fun.
It is
have fun
absurd.
trying to hit him, guys, in the National League. I think he's going to win the Cy Young if he's healthy.
He might strike out 800 batters.
Yeah, it's going to be exciting in Atlanta for sure when he's on the mound. Other than those 3 guys in Strider, Fried, and Sale, you've also got a veteran in Charlie Morton who has eaten up a lot of innings for you over the past couple seasons. Likely going to be his final year. But obviously, we touched on the lineup. Ronald Acuna Jr. obviously was the MVP, the unanimous MVP in the NL last season. I don't think he's going to quite reach those numbers, as those were just video game numbers last season. I think he's going to have a really solid year. He's going to prove why he's the best hitter in the game right now. And the Braves are looking, I just confirmed this, to win their 7th straight NL East division title. I think they're going to. This is a team whose World Series window is wide open and has been for the past couple years.
And will be for a lot more because everyone's signed to 12-year, $3 contracts.
Yeah, for sure. Other teams have kind of started to follow that model. I, off the top of the head, think of Brian Reynolds signing that long-term deal with the Pirates. Other teams are just trying to be the Braves, and I can't blame them for that with as much regular season success as the Braves have had in the past few seasons. Ironically enough, the season where they were riddled with injuries and didn't have as much regular season success as when they won the World Series. So as a Braves fan, I'm really hoping that this season they can be dominant from wire to wire, including the postseason. And I think this is the team that possibly and probably could do it. I think they're far and away the best team in baseball, as I've mentioned over and over. And I'm just really excited as a Braves fan to watch 162 games of this roster and this team.
Yeah, if I were a Braves fan, I would be excited too. But now it's time for our playoff predictions for the NL. I have the Braves in first. I think they're going to be the best team not only in the NL but in baseball. I have the Giants in second, then the Reds in third as the NL Central winners. Then I have the Phillies in fourth, actually winning more games than the Dodgers, who I have slotted into the fifth spot. And then my last wildcard team is going to be the Arizona Diamondbacks.
For me, it's the Atlanta Braves coming in first place. Then there's a sizable gap. Just kidding. And then in second place, I've got the Dodgers winning the West, the Cubs in third winning the Central. I think the Phillies are going to be the first wild card. I think they're going to have the second most wins, as Micah does, behind the Braves. I think the Diamondbacks get the second wild card and are in the fifth spot there. And then I think the Padres are going to be able to do enough to get the third wild card and be the sixth seed in this NL postseason. So that's how I see the regular season shaking out. Hopefully the Braves can capitalize on their talent and make another push for my Braves fandom's sake.
Yeah, it should be a great season of Major League Baseball this year. But one final thing to touch on, we have a little bit of college baseball for you. As I know, as a Florida fan, I really enjoyed the weekend as Florida continued its trend of being terrible in midweek games and then just being the best team in the country on a weekend series as they beat LSU in a series. But what made my weekend even better as a Florida fan was what happened to the Florida State Seminoles, which I think you might know a little bit about, Samuel.
Yeah, so on Saturday, Clemson played a doubleheader with the Florida State Seminoles, who came in undefeated 19-0 to Doug Kingsmore Stadium. In that first game, Florida State able to land the first punch, hitting a grand slam in the first inning to jump out to a 4-0 lead. Clemson able to come back and win that one in pretty dominant fashion. Actually run ruled the Seminoles 15-5 there in Game 1. In Game 2 of the doubleheader, though, that's when things started to get a little bit crazy. Florida State got out to a big lead, dominated on the mound throughout that one. And going into the ninth inning, they were ahead 8-1. Well, the final score was 9-8. Clemson, all in the ninth inning. I encourage you to go look up the radio call of that one. William Qualkenbush
very good. Elite
went
radio
absolutely
call.
insane when Blake Wright hit that game-tying grand slam. And then
Blake
Jacob
Wright, by the
Hinderleiter-
way.
Yeah, National Player of the Week, Co-National Player of the Week, I should say, ACC Player of the Week. Just absolutely going nuclear. He tied the game on a grand slam. Jacob Hinderleiter a home run earlier in that inning, and then actually getting the walk-off single to win that one. And then Sunday, you're thinking, okay, Florida State jumps out to this lead. Clemson still wins the series. No, guess what? The Clemson Tigers did it again. Florida State blew another lead. Blake Wright hit another home run. And the
It was
Tigers,
10-1, was it not? Was it 10-1?
I think it was 11-2.
11-2.
But the Tigers stormed back and won that game 14-12. They now sit at number 2 in a lot of polls. I think they have an argument for number 1. This team has the it factor. I'm really hoping they can get back to Omaha. This lineup has a lot of depth, as we've seen throughout the early stages of this season. If the pitching can get a little bit better, especially the Friday starting pitching, as Clemson hasn't really found their guy yet in that spot, I think this team is well positioned to get back to Omaha for the first time since 2010. But regardless, a really exciting weekend for the Clemson Tigers. In all sports, really.
Yeah, another really exciting weekend for sports in general is March Madness, MLB, college baseball, really anything you want. And this weekend is going to be even more of it as we hit the Sweet 16, the Elite 8. Opening day is tomorrow, and we get more MLB baseball throughout the weekend, and then more college baseball as usual, if you can find it, because ESPN loves to hide it, which is bad. ESPN, please quit doing that. But anyway, that is it for this week of SM Sports Radio, and we'll be back next week with reactions to your Final Four teams and reactions to MLB opening day weekend. But until then, we'll see you guys later.